by the end of FY21. This means the debt service that we build into the rate will go
is now joining.
This means that total debt service that we need to build into the rate budget will increase too. However, we expect to continue our program of prepaying indebtedness, and market rates continue to be attractive. So we think this is a manageable and even a sensible balance sheet approach.
And Omar, quick question is Adam Freed. Quick question on the graph on the bottom shows an increase in the outstanding debt. How does this relate to debt service payments, and are we going to see increasing payments in the next 2 to 5 years as we increase the outstanding debt?
Yeah. So the debt service is a simple calculation. It's the total stock of outstanding debt multiplied by our weighted average cost of our weighted average interest rate across all the different types of debt we sell. If the total amount of debt is increasing but our cost of debt remains the same, yes, that would we would see debt service change. It would increase in proportion to the amount of debt outstanding. Now in practice, not all else is equal. Market conditions will fluctuate. The cost of debt will move around a little bit. We have the ability to kind of change the composition of our debt too. We can move away from more expensive stuff and substitute cheaper stuff. There's new ways to issue securities that come out. But all else equal, yes, you would generally expect if the stock of debt is increasing and we don't change our financing approaches, the debt service we build into the budget would increase by the 2.7%, the 4.8%, kind of in line with the total increase in indebtedness.
And I would add, before I would add, this is Joe Murin. We also do have a significant portion in the budget each year that either goes towards the defeasance of debt, which is the retiring of older, more expensive debt at a higher interest rate. That's saving interest on that one. We also do have the ability to use cash finance debt as well, where you do a capital asset, but you pay for it using cash, therefore saving on the debt service. So that's another method that we have to monitor and manage, some level of how, the debt, portfolio is growing.
Yeah, this is Adam. I think you guys have been very impressed over the past few years, the debt refinancing as well as the pay-go programs. But just would make sure, particularly as we see revenues decreasing, being mindful and balancing the need to take into account the economic climate for customers now with the increases that may result in the future if debt service continues to go, but rates are kept low now. We've certainly seen that in other systems around the country, and even in New York's history, that you end up then with double-digit rate increases in future years because you've been able to keep the rates low in the past. So just making sure we're really being mindful and looking at what those impacts could be, not just on the rates now in the system, but always keeping that view 4 or 5 years out so we can keep a level increases for rates if they're needed rather than keeping them low and then having huge shocks to the system later on for customers.
Yeah, that's we absolutely take that guidance. I'll add we manage the capital plan on a 10-year forecast. We try to kind of level out just how much capital spending we'll have, both for financial reasons and just logistically what we can actually complete in projects in a given year. We manage the system off a published 5-year financial forecast, and we have behind the scenes a 10-year model we use for that as well. So we're absolutely looking to make sure decisions today don't spike rates or cause an issue 7 years down the road. We expect to continue to take that long-term, kind of decade modeling approach. I think that's good advice.
Okay, so this is Joe Murin again. Moving on to slide 7, which is a pie chart of the system's 10-year capital investment plan. And this is in totality that for the 10 years covering fiscal year 2020 through 2029, there's the anticipation of having $20.5 billion in the capital program. This was what the mayor issued with his executive budget back in April, and it was a very minor change from what was previously issued in January, the January plan, in light of the fact that the budget was colored somewhat by the COVID-19. There were not a lot of changes between the January plan to the April plan. And as you could see, so it was pretty much the same pie chart that you hear. State of good repair at a little over a third at $7.1 billion. The mandates at a little over a quarter at $5.4 billion. sewer construction at $3.2 billion, water main construction at $2.1, and Southeast Queens at $1.6, and the balance in dependability and other. The changes that did happen between the January plan and the executive budget were there were some additional funds brought forward for non-city projects, which was being funded with federal funds from the from Sandy resources for the Rockaway Wastewater Resource Recovery Plan. We also accelerated some funds from the out years into the current years for $250 million for repair and replacement of sewers and water mains, $56 million for smaller capital repairs, which is our job order contracting program with the Bureau of Wastewater Treatment, and $40 million for the primary settling tanks in the Bowery Bay water resource recovery facility. This ties into the slide that Omar just went through. We're monitoring this very closely. As everyone can imagine, with the COVID situation, there has been a slowdown. We were, particularly in the construction market, we as utility were not as impacted on that because we are considered an essential service. So we have, for the most part, been continuing with our construction project, operating under the requirements of being, making sure that employees are safe and socially distancing, in the workplace and on the construction sites. We do have some degree of, I think, slowdown in terms of the system, the way that the city is operating, just by the nature of everybody being teleworking. So it has been, a delay in getting contracts issued. So which is, maybe a side benefit as well, because we're not putting as much capital work out as we might have thought, but we're expecting that we will be able to catch up with that in the next year to 2 years. But we're monitoring it very closely to make sure that, whereas to the, member Freed's point, managing both the debt service as well as our ability to make sure we're maintaining the infrastructure of the system so that we can continue with water delivery and wastewater treatment. Moving on, so capital at slide 8, capital and operations maintenance update. So I sort of just did cover the top part of that with the previous slide, talking about the COVID impact on the capital construction and where the accelerated of the $360 million of capital funds, what comprised that. On the operations and maintenance side, like all city agencies, DEP is operating under a conservative budget strategy.
Is now exiting.
With respect to the rest of fiscal year 20 and 21. We have not in any way diminished, as we noted in the opening, the scope of service we're providing. All of our employees that are deployed in the field, such as our wastewater treatment plants, in the streets to maintain sewers and water mains, and in the upstate reservoir operations, are reporting to duty, and we have not had any disruption in those. We have had, as we noted as well, a number of those personnel that do work in the operations of, administrative support, engineering, scientific, technical. 80% of those are teleworking now. It's worked very effectively. As the chair noted at the beginning, we have a very robust IT staff and capability that has been able to position us very well to effectively, manage teleworking, both for the short term and we're expecting for the long term as well. So we have not made any significant changes to the operations and maintenance budget at this time in light of the COVID. There have been some minor changes, such as some, labor settlements, some adjustments to heat, light, and power, based on, anticipations that maybe the oil prices that have been going down significantly will be playing out in what we pay for fuel and for gas. But overall, it's been pretty much trying to keep a steady state.
Linda Gordon.
We are monitoring very closely.
Exiting.
Given that we do not, we want to be poised should we need to move either up or down in terms of what our flexibility is as we see how the revenue picture develops. On to slide 9.
Unknown participant is now joining.
This shows the rate proposal that we are putting forth to the board for consideration. We're proposing no change to rates and to continue billing customers at the current water and wastewater rates. There would be no increase for customers in city and no increase for those systems north of the city that draw upon the water system. And we would continue the $20 million for affordability and bill credit programs that we have in operation. I think this was a prudent decision on our part to put forth to the board, given how much uncertainty that both we as the system have, as well as what our ratepayers are facing right now, given the economic hardship that so many are going through. We will be monitoring this situation very closely, but we think it's prudent, as I said, at this time, to keep the rates as they are, so that we could both we as well as our ratepayers can see how they're going to manage over the next 6 to 12 months.
Joe, thank you. It's Al, and I don't know how the board will decide on the proposal, but it sounds to me from your comments and Omar's as well as Adam's questions to you with the possibility of what we want to do is to avoid double-digit rates in the future. It sounds to me like sometime during the year, maybe in the fall early, we need to get together. We need to have you all sit with the board, call it a special meeting, and describe to us our financial condition with regard to revenue at that time, so that we can see what your projections were now and what your projections are going forward and how revenues are actually being affected by the two things you just described, unemployment or reduced employment, and simply the virus itself. It sounds like if the board were to approve this as you currently proposed it, that we would need to look more carefully than we have in the past at what the numbers look like at an earlier time in the fiscal year. I'm not suggesting that you would agree with that, but I'm saying it for the purposes of letting the board know that I'm going to push pretty hard to have you all do that with us in a board meeting, such that we can hear it and then make some decisions about whether we need to consider making changes before we might normally make those changes. With regard to rates, I'm concerned about what I just heard you all say, and I'd like to talk about it, Joe, with you and with Omar and anybody else who wants to listen sometime in the next week, just to see if you think that we should and could do that.
No, I think that's a very good suggestion, Mr. Chair, and we are definitely open to that. I do want to, make, understand that we are presenting a balanced budget and one that is sustainable, we think, given the conditions as we know them right now. But as you noted, there are a lot of uncertainties, and we think it is just prudent for you to, to put forth that and for us to consider that we are going to have to rethink and maybe look at these again. But for now, we think that with the zero, we could sustain that as needed and move forward. But it's definitely, consideration of how does that play itself out for the long term as well.
Yeah, this is Adam. I echo the chair's comments, and would also love to have a conversation, just getting an understanding of what the next 5 years look like, and knowing there's a lot of uncertainty. Are there any scenario planning of had we seen revenue growth as normal, whether we see the declining trend over a number of years, and then how that impacts with the increase in debt service. Just continue to be concerned about increased debt service payments and knowing that these are investments we need to make. So not questioning those, but just making sure we can avoid the double-digit shock in the future that has occurred both to the New York system and then just the systems throughout the country. So would love just to see a 5-year projection on revenues and debt service payments, so we can get an understanding whether there's going to be a larger disconnect in the future as we consider this year's rate increase.
But Adam, you would agree, I think, that it's too soon to get that now. There's no way to know now.
Well, they certainly will know
the accuracy of any projections we would make now. It sounds to me like that's something that ought to happen maybe mid-summer, maybe the end of the summer, as opposed to trying to get a projection now. Or should
There's certainly a projection that can be done on debt service payments.
Sure.
So
Sure.
that would be, and then even a scenario planning of a couple of different types of, here's what business as usual would have been on revenues, and here's what a kind of moderate amount would be. That could be done, or even as a business as usual. But I'd love to get a better sense of what our debt service payments are going to be, and then we can have a sense of how that could or could not impact rates in the future.
And
I don't think issue at all. I mean, I think if staff is comfortable doing that, then we should go forward with that. I just don't want to have to do 2 or 3 reviews of projections. You're right. The debt service can be projected. We can know precisely what that, or within reason, what that may be. But certainly we can't talk about revenues now. They can't give us any reliable projections on revenues. Do you agree?
This is Joe Murin, and I agree, Mr. Chair. I think it's a reasonable request, and I think we'll be willing and able to accommodate it to Member Freed's request, that is. But I think, as you noted, that it is something that I think we're probably going to have to at least get past the summer and into the fall, because you're really not going to have, there are so many different variables at play right now between the economy, the revenue, what the usage is going to be like, also what our very budget situation is as the system as well as the city as well. And that also has to do with what we're going to be seeing within, while we don't receive an inordinate amount of federal and or state, support, there are areas that they make decisions that could impact us, and there are also things which could be to the benefit as well. There is a lot of talk going on right now about a stimulus package, which we had happen down in, back in 2009. And we benefited greatly from when, President Obama put forth the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act. Whether, President Trump will be putting forth something similar like that, there's a lot of talk going on. So I think, probably late summer, maybe mid-fall, we may have a better idea, and I think we could come back to the board and talk about where we think we're going to be. And I think we'll work closely with the chair and the members to see that we can make sure that you've got the knowledge and the resources to be able to, guide you in terms of the decisions we're going to have to be making.
And then I agree with Adam with regard to the debt service projections. I think that's doable. That number may change marginally, but it's depending on refundings. But I don't think that's going to be a tough projection. I think the tougher projection is going to be whether or not we can service the debt adequately with the revenues that we have, and we're not going to know that. Assuming that your proposal passes, we wouldn't know that until well into the summer at least. And Adam, you may disagree with that, and if you want them to pull together the projections before that, then nobody here would stand in the way of that. But it's a project, and it might not be reliable a month after it's completed.
And I would also, and I agree, Mr. Chair, and I would also add that, it's important to remember that, while we're going through this, on the other, side of the house, the Water Finance Authority is responsible for the debt service side, and they are in the process right now. We're going to be going out into the market for, a refinancing or, an offering in the next few weeks. So we have to be very cognizant of what we're saying and what we're providing, that are we creating a disclosure responsibility. So I would turn to, I will be talking to Ola Chernat, the executive director there, and we'll probably have to coordinate what we can be able to give to the board in the context of, what she would be having to issue with the offering statement, the official statement.
And this is Adam, just with one follow-up question. And in the event that, revenues continue to decline, there's economic hardship for the system between now and the next scheduled and normal cadence of our rate proposals, are there opportunities for the board to come back and say, we need to have an interim increase or decrease, wherever the case may be? Or is it only set on the 1 year, kind of May, June?
Well, Adam, that was my point. If we were to call a board meeting and do the comparisons, and literally look at the strategic planning and how close to our plans we came, both in the positive and maybe in the negative, it might be necessary to consider a rate resetting without having any sense now of whether that might be necessary, and it would assume the approval of the proposal that's being made now. Assuming we pass it, might it be necessary to do something midterm? And I would argue that for the system, the answer to that ought to be yes. But I don't know that answer. I'm telling you that we ought to be able to figure that out. One would hate to do it, but it might be necessary at least to consider it. So yes.
This is the board has fiduciary and statutory responsibilities to raise the revenue it needs to run and maintain the system to a high standard, and there's no prohibition on what part of the calendar you can take action to kind of fulfill those duties. So I would just add that as a comment.
Perfect. Thank you, Omar. I think that answers both of our questions.
This is Arlene Shaw. Just a quick question. Do we have a sense as to where the rating agencies are coming out in terms of rating debt, and sort of if there's any change in methodology vis-a-vis that debt given COVID?
We've had a few conversations with the rating agencies. So the general tenor the agencies are taking toward the industry, toward the sort of publicly owned water utility industry, is kind of stable outlook. Most utilities are in the same boat we are. They're seeing usage declines, higher on the residential side, lower on the commercial side, lower overall. There's a recognition that these are typically sole source type businesses. Water is obviously an essential input commodity for most activities as well as your ongoing existence. And utilities have the scope to change billing practices as they need to make their financials work. So the overall outlook on the industry has been one of kind of stable outlook. There's various within that, but again, the industry-wide outlook.
Unknown participant is now joining.
It's stable outlook.
And this is Olga Chfernat, Executive Director of New York City Water Authority. I just would like to add that as Joe and Omar discussed earlier, the authority is preparing to be in the market with the refunding and the new money transaction in early June, and we already received Moody's confirmation of their AA1 rating for the system's bonds in advance of this transaction. We're still working with S&P and Fitch, and anticipating to hear from them shortly.
Olga,
and just a quick question on that.
Sorry, Moody's. I'm sorry, I cut somebody off. Please.
Just Arlene, just a question on that, just a follow-up. In terms of the underlying rating, is there a requirement for them to be re-rated on an annual basis? Because, as we think about the question whether, and just to sort of run through my thought here, as we think about sort of whether or not we need to come back and raise ratings, just thinking about sort of, are you getting annually re-rated on the existing debt? The worst thing in the world for us would be that we freeze revenue and then that leads to some sort of ratings downgrade. So that's sort of where I'm thinking about it. Just being someone who issues bonds myself and have been talking to the rating agencies, I just know that liquidity and income is something that they're all supremely focused on. So just wondering, what's the re-rating schedule kind of generally on the bonds that we have existing, as well as the new one that we're planning to issue?
We on average are in the market around 8 to 10 times a year, and with this, and we request ratings for every time we issue bonds. So with this frequency, we basically in touch with the ratings agencies, pretty much continuously. Basically 2 weeks after the state of emergency was declared due to COVID-19, we reached out to the rating agencies just to touch base, to let them know what's going on, that the system is operating as expected, and we have very close communications with them basically throughout the year. But ratings are formally requested every time we have a bond transaction in the market.
Thank you. That was helpful.
That was helpful, Olga. Thank you very much. You answered my question, too.
So this is Jeff Lynch again. I'm sorry, go ahead. So this is Jeff Lynch again. I'm on slide 10 on the typical DEP bills, which will remain the same at the current levels based on our proposal. I'll just quickly run through and not go through all the details here since they are the same from FY20 to FY21. The average single-family charge will remain the same at about $967 on average for 70,000 gallons per year. The average multifamily meter charge for FY21 will be about $718. The multifamily conservation program will be about $1,052 on average, and the minimum charge properties will be about $463, and these again are the same rates as they were.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
All right, this is Omar again. We're on to slide 11. This is an overview of what we're doing on the affordability front. I'm touching on some comments from Marlene and some things the rating agencies have touched on as well. Affordability, particularly the lower end of the income distribution, is a bigger area of concern both for policy and for the rating agencies. With that in mind, as well as the overall emphasis of the administration on affordability, we are maintaining the package of bill credits and affordability measures we had in the budget last year as well, and for FY20. It's a $20 million allocation spread across 3 different programs. There's a $6 million program for small property owners tied to people who have a property tax discount because they're a senior citizen, because they have a certain income threshold, or because they have a disability status. That's a bill credit of $116 per recipient, and it covers about 52,000 small property owners across all 5 boroughs. The second program is a rental affordability type of program. It targets owner-operators of larger, so these are tax class 2, so 4-unit and up multifamily properties. Are subject to a rental affordability agreement with either HPD or HDC, where there's at least 15 years left on the agreement. It could be a new 15-year or a 31 halfway done. There's got to be 15 left, however it happens. It's $250 per credit per unit. There's no you can get more than 1 credit per property. We have a methodology of allocating those out to make sure everyone can participate, but you can get more than 1 credit per property is the point. You got to have water efficiency conservation measures in place. You got to be metered to qualify. And we're going to preserve the thing we introduced last year as well. Since the program is typically oversubscribed, in terms of allocating which buildings get the credits first, we give them to the most affordable properties first, where affordability is defined as what's the average rent for the property divided by the area median income in the zip code where the property is located. So that's no change from last year. It is a change from the early days of the program, where it was first come, first served, but the same methodology, the same size, the same ranking formula will be used in FY20. The last program is budgeted at $4 million. That's not a cap. We can do as much as before what we're thinking will happen. This is where you have a property. It can be any type of property. There's no property type qualification. The property has a leak. The leak is substantial. It's 2x or more what you were using same time last year. If you fix the leak, as evidenced by the usage went down, we'll credit you back half of the dollar cost of that leak. So you had a $200 bill normally. You had $1,000 this year because of the leak. The difference is $800. We'll give you $400 back as a bill credit. So across the 3 programs, $20 million. All program terms and dollar amounts, again, consistent with what we did last year, FY20.
So this is Jeff Lynch again. I'm on slide 12. New York City rates remain below other major cities in the country. I'm not going to go through every line here, but you can see the trend from 2016 over the last 5 years, from 2016 to 2020, where the New York City average as of last year was was 17.6% below the average of the 30 largest cities. This year, again, we don't have a rate increase, so certainly that'll at least stay at that percent, or that number will go up depending on what other cities do. We don't have all those numbers analyzed yet, but when we do, we will update this.
Jeff, thank you. You all eliminated the slide that I very much looked forward to, and that's the slide that literally compares the New York City, or maybe it's further on, compares the New York City based on New York City usage, what people are paying in New York versus what they pay, what other folk in large cities are paying.
Alphonse, we don't have in this presentation, but we actually have that slide and we have the data, so we can stick that on the website and circulate it to the members as well. We have that. We just don't have it in this presentation.
Thank you, and
Rebecca
I'd appreciate seeing it.
Is now exiting.
Okay. So this is back to Omar. This is slide 13. We circulated to members, and it'll be on the website too, a markup of the rate schedule, just comparing what's different to from this year to last year. The answer is basically nothing. It's the same rates and charges, so it's a very light markup. But we did want to draw attention to one change that will be in there. We have a billing plan called the Multifamily Conservation Plan, which is a flat rate plan. It's a little over $1,000 per apartment unit for properties in the plan. You got to be in this program. You have to have water efficiency meters and water efficiency fixtures installed in at least 2/3 of the units. You got to be metered. A couple of other smaller criteria. And most properties on this billing plan conform to that standard. We have a small subclass of properties that were on old, ancient frontage type flat rate billing plans, who we migrated as a group onto this billing program several years ago, and we gave them a grace period to prove their compliance to us, which many of them have done, not all have. To try and address that kind of dwindling pool of properties on the rate plan who hadn't yet demonstrated compliance, we introduced a 10% surcharge concept that would be added on.
Is now exiting.
That would be added on to their bill, and that charge was going to be assessed in FY20. We made the decision not to assess in FY20, or we're proposing to the board rather. We made the decision to edit the rate schedule to we're proposing to the board not to assess it in FY20 and not to assess in FY21 either. We just don't think now is the right time to be issuing a sizable surcharge that would be felt considerably by some of these properties, particularly in light of if you look at what types of properties are in that pool. It's a heavily affordable property, affordable rental type of profile. You have a lot of HDFC properties.
Is now joining.
Other affordable housing rental type formats, as well as a lot of owner-occupied co-ops with balance sheets that would struggle to adjust to a large surcharge shock like that. So we're suggesting editing the rate schedule, defer, just no penalty in FY20, no penalty in FY21, not the right time with all that's going on, and then to revisit how we structure this in a future rate year. Moving on to slide 14 as well. This one's me. What we've got here is we have an outlook for the FY20 budget, and we have a preliminary forecast of FY21. I emphasize both of these are an estimate and preliminary. Things will change for FY20 as the year closes. We may have to make some modifications to FY21 in light of changes that we're seeing day by day out there. The main messages I have on this budget, the proposed FY21, is it is a smaller budget. We're estimating FY20. It will be a nearly 12% reduction in total revenue and expenditures. We are not bridging that gap by shortchanging DEP fundamental water and sewer operations. Those will be about in line in FY21 with what we did in FY20. We are making the adjustment more on the balance sheet side than the operating side. in particular through adjustments to our target year-end cash reserve that we use as a prepayment of the following year's debt, as well as through certain debt service savings compared to what we'd modeled previously. We're also releasing a small amount of cash from escrow with some good timing. We can use that to offset part of the change as well. And we're also modeling no recurrence of the rental payment. We're taking the administration's guidance that the FY20 rental payment was a one-time event that will not recur in FY21. So altogether, we are looking at a nearly 12% reduction to the budget, and it does not come off the back of core water and sewer operations or system integrity. It's more kind of balance sheet side adjustments that bridge the gap. Are there other questions on this one?
Yeah, this is Adam Freed. Just flagging the rental payments and the one-time reinstatement was really disappointed to see that occur. I think there's been a lot of focus on that in the past couple of years about, and was thrilled to see that be forgiven. Would love to see that if there's a permanent way of ending that rental payment so it doesn't loom as a risk recurring for customers, that it can be coming back in and making sure that, we're not balancing other fiscal issues on the backs of ratepayers with that. I think the affordability programs continue to be a hallmark of the administration and a tremendous benefit we're providing to ratepayers. And just want to make sure that trend continues and that we don't see the rental payment reinstated in future years and coming in and out as we face economic uncertainty and other realms of the city budget.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
Thank you, Adam. Amen.
Yes, thank you, Adam. We hear you on that.
Okay, so this is back to Joe Murin. Just to recap, the rate proposal for July 1st is basically no change. So continue billing customers at the FY20 water and wastewater rates. So no increase to in-city or to the north of the city, and a continuation of the $20 million for affordability bill credit programs. I'll just take the last two slides as well, which is, so the Waterboard public hearings, the Waterboard will hold one New York City public hearing on Monday, June 15th. So that will be the opportunity for any of those on the call who wish to, give their opinion or, make a statement to the board, on the rate proposal. They can come forth at that time. The hearing will be conducted by a conference call, and a transcript of the hearing will be available on the Waterboard website afterwards. And comments are, in the package that is on the website. You can email, as Nomar said, that's nycwaterboard@dep.nyc. You could fax 718-595-3595. You could mail 59-17 Junction Boulevard, 8th floor, Flushing, New York, 1137. So the schedules for the hearings are in-city public hearing by conference call on June 15th at 2 p.m. And then the next Waterboard meeting to have the board consider and then, vote on the proposal for fiscal year will be by conference call on June 19th at 8:30 a.m. That concludes the presentation portion of this of the meeting. I turn it back to Chairman Carney, if there's any closing on this part of the meeting.
Thank you very much, Joe. Of course, the members recognize and understand that we need to take no action on this. There will be a public hearing, as Joe just pointed out, on the 15th of June, where we hope there will be public testimony. One never, in that circumstance, one never knows. And based on whatever testimony we hear, plus the views of the members themselves on the proposal we just heard, on the 19th of June, we're going by conference call. We're going to meet and make a decision on the rate proposal. Hope everybody can be there. Are there any other questions for Joe or Jeff or Omar? Hearing none, we'll move to the next agenda item. It's a resolution which, if approved by the Water Board, would complete the appointment of Grant Thornton as the auditors for the Water Finance
Welch is now exiting.
For the Water Finance Authority.
Michael Morrell
is now exiting.
As well as for the Water Board. Just for your information, the information of the members and for any guests on the phone. The auditors are approved by the respective boards of the two groups, the Water Finance Authority and the Waterboard. Prior to that, there is a meeting of a joint audit committee of the Waterboard and the Water Finance Authority. That meeting was held several days ago, at which the proposed auditors, Grant Thornton, new auditors,
Vito Signorelli, RSA,
is now exiting.
Made a presentation. It was, in my view, it was a good presentation. Good to meet those folk. Bob Balducci led that meeting. Bob and knew as much as the joint committee needed to know about the process of getting to recommending Grant Thornton. The agreement is a 4-year agreement. Grant Thornton audits the city's financial statements. Interestingly enough, as a part of the city, it makes sense then that we would be audited by the same folks. The system's financial statements will be audited by the audit firm. There is a maximum proposed rate of $732,000. Bob, I don't remember how that compares with last year's rates. It's been my experience that when you hire a new auditor, because the learning curve is so steep for the first year, that very often their rate is higher than the rate of the departing firm. But I don't remember our prior auditor's rate last year.
Sure. So this is Bob Balducci. I did take a look at it. The rate for the upcoming fiscal year is about $4,000 more than last year. And the rates going across the term of the contract, it increases, and that is normal even if we were to have retained an existing firm. So we find that the rates very comparable and competitive.
And not at all material.
Yes,
I mean the increase is not at all material, right?
Yeah, that's part of the competitive part. Once, as the companies become competitive, the rates become competitive as they bid.
So there is always the possibility that they will pay them more, but that's because we may have need of their expertise to do special projects. The AICPA prohibits an audit firm from auditing the system, the financial statements. It prohibits projects that relate to the audit work that they performed for the firm. So any special projects will be away from the audit of the financial statements and in some other part of either the Water Board or the Water Finance Authority. And with that, Bob Balducci is on the phone. Adam, John, and I are all three on the phone. Are there any questions from the other members? Hearing none, I guess I can't just ask for a motion to approve. Yes, I can. So may I have a motion to approve the selection of this auditor?
Adam Freed, so moved.
Thank you. Is there
John Golden, second.
John, Adam, thank you both. I'm going to do the voice vote. Dr. Carolina, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay. Evelyn Fernandez-Ketchum?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
John Golden?
Yes.
Juke Sue?
Yes.
Thank you, Juke. Arlene?
Jason Boker.
Yes.
Thank you, Arlene.
Is now exiting.
And I vote yes. That means that the motion approved and seconded has been, motion made and seconded has been approved unanimously. And we go on to the next item. The next item is
now exiting.
The presentation by DEP on a proposed grant of easements. I think there are 4 to property owners in Olive, New York. And we've got Matt Schwab from DEP's Bureau of Water Supply. And Lisa, is it Sophia or Sophio?
Sophio, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. From DEP's legal department. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Jim
and
Buckley.
Is now exiting.
Everyone else on the call. My name's Matthew Schwab. I'm a real property manager with the Bureau of Water Supply based out of Kingston, New York. And I just want to give a brief overview of the project that this resolution is related to. And then Lisa can give some details about the easements and the rationale behind the request. So the project that we need these easements to be granted is known as CAT 252, and it's a capital project involving reconstruction and repair and maintenance of some of the infrastructure that was put in place when the Ashokan Reservoir was built over 100 years ago.
Lauren Mogul.
Is now exiting.
Just as real quick review, and for the members of the board, there's some location maps in your packet. The Ashokan Reservoir was built between 1905 and 1915. Those are rough dates. It was the first reservoir constructed west of the Hudson River. And the reservoir is located in 3 towns in Ulster County, the towns of Olive, Hurley, and Marbletown. It's obviously a major disruption to build a reservoir of that size, and so as part of construction of the reservoir, there were road networks in the valley that became inundated when the Esopus Creek was dammed, and the city was required, as part of the authorization for the reservoir, to build certain infrastructure to replace and create a new road network around the new body of water. And included in that were a significant bridge over the Esopus Creek. You go to the second map in the packet. At the northwestern extreme of the reservoir, the Esopus Creek flows from north to south, and the hamlet of Boyceville is just to the north of the reservoir. And so the city constructed a bridge over the Esopus Creek for vehicular use. That bridge is over 100 years old. And the city of New York also built Route 28, what is now known as Route 28A, which is a small state highway that goes all the way along the southern border of the reservoir, from one end of the reservoir to the other. So CAT 252 involves upgrades, very necessary upgrades to that old infrastructure. We're relocating the Esopus Creek Bridge so that it's just downstream to the south of the existing bridge. That'll allow the existing bridge to be used during construction. That new bridge will improve the flood water capacity to flow underneath the bridge. There's been a lot of flooding problems in Boyceville, and basically replacing
Peter is now joining.
Replacing that 100-year-old bridge. I think many of you heard about the Ashokan Rail Trail, which the city partnered with Ulster County on, which has been a big success.
Unknown participant is now joining.
Opened up this year, and CAT 252 will enable the city to improve the parking at the northern terminus of that rail trail, and then there will be a recreational lane for walking and pedestrian use, bicycle use over the new bridge, so that people using the rail trail can get into the hamlet of Boyceville. And then the third component, which is the one relevant to this action, is that we're realigning Route 28A, and we're removing a long-term concern of a dangerous sharp turn in the road. And that's the area where the driveways need to be extended. So if you go to the 2 maps at the end of the list on this packet, there are 3. The road is going to be relocated to the south and east from its existing alignment, which is going to remove that sharp turn. And in doing so, there are 3 driveways that need to be extended to meet up with the new road. So the road is going to move further. It's on city property already.
Is now exiting.
And the new road will be somewhat to the east, south and east, as I mentioned, necessitating extensions of the driveway between 60 and 135 feet. Since these new driveway extensions will be on city land, there's a need for a written agreement between the city and the property owners to govern their use of city land. The general outlines
Unknown participant is now exiting.
Of the proposal is that the city will build these driveway extensions as part of CAT 252. They'll be for the use of those private owners who will then be responsible for maintenance of the driveway. They will have to plow the road, the driveway, and they will have to do any resurfacing that they want to do. So that is, in a nutshell, the reason why these easements are permission to grant these easements is being sought, and maybe Lisa can just give a little detail about the nature of the easements and the process to do so.
Sure. Hi, this is Lisa Sofio, DEP Bureau of Legal Affairs. I'm happy to answer any other questions, but just briefly, the authority to grant these easements comes from Title IV, Section 1069 of the Administrative Code. And in addition to setting forth the maintenance obligations of the property owners that the driveways will serve, we are also getting indemnification from them. And we have standard cost approval from the law department for the form of easement that we've drafted.
Mr. Chairman, this is John Golden. May I ask a question or two?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So a couple of questions that I have resulting from this. The first is, just so I understand it, we would be moving the road because of the bend in the road. Is that the only reason that it's being relocated?
It has to be relocated somewhat because the bridge is going to move. So as you cross the Sophus Creek, the new bridge is going to be 50 to 100 feet south of the old road. So the original part of the old road where it met the old bridge will have to move. There also are going to be a lot of improvements. And one thing I didn't mention is parking for the rail trail will be improved because it's very popular. And so the parking area on city land is really insufficient. So they're going to be connecting to that new parking area. But this road, it happens that this safety concern, which, like I said, is longstanding, is only a couple of hundred yards further down Route 28A. So the project incorporated fixing this, essentially an outdated road design is being fixed for safety reasons. So the entire road segment needs to be relocated both for the bridge and to fix this safety concern.
But just so I'm clear, and this is John Golden again, the map that we're looking at shows the beginning of the old road and the newly constructed road as being virtually adjacent to one another. So I'm assuming that the new bridge would be able to be connectable to the old road, at least as shown in this diagram. Is that right?
Yes, but I guess what you're pointing out is that the alignment veers away from the old road. If you look at the Exhibit A3, which is closer to the bridge, you'll see that the old road is it's very close, but it's above and therefore to the west of the new location. So that new road is going to continue down to meet up with the bridge. I'm sorry, I don't have a map of the entire road realignment.
And the other question I had also is, I understand that under the original circumstances of the creation of the reservoir over 100 years ago, the city had the obligation to create a road. Why is it the city's obligation now to create a new road with a preferable design in this area?
So this is Lisa Sofio. The obligation was to construct the roads, and it's also to forever repair and maintain the roads.
But just to be clear, so it's not to create any new roads. It would be to maintain and repair the existing roads.
Right.
Correct.
And then
the
last question I just wanted to ask is two more questions. One is it customary when a new road is built that the polity that's building the road construct a driveway to meet that road for the private landowners?
So in the state highway law, it provides for state highways and county roads, specifically provides for just this, where the change to the road results in a situation like this. It gets a little tricky because while these are state highways, they're owned by the city, and we felt it was prudent and in consultation with the law department to act as the state and county would, because we are there's sort of an anomalous situation where there's a city owning a state highway outside of our borders.
Thank you. And then the last question I had is it required that an easement be provided as opposed to a license that gives us, the city and the system, more flexibility as time progresses rather than creating a perpetual right that runs with the land?
It is not a requirement that there be an easement as opposed to a license. We felt from a liability perspective that the easement actually, although we're giving them a right, it actually helps us because then they're not a guest and they have the responsibility to maintain, and we have the indemnification. We think, the easement runs with the land. If it was a license, we'd have to then worry about changes in ownership and negotiate with any new owner.
So I guess what all of my questions are really centering around is what is the system getting out of this, number one, or number two, what obligation is the system fulfilling by doing all of this, putting aside for the moment the obligation to maintain the old road, and I understand we have that obligation, but what's the consideration that we're receiving?
So the consideration for granting the easements is the indemnification and maintenance obligations. They're getting. I hear what you're saying, that this is really to benefit them, but we are moving the road away from their driveway, and as a result of that, that's what's causing the need to extend the driveway, and therefore, since we're going to do that, we think it's prudent to give them an easement for the liability reasons I mentioned.
So, and I realize the question of the road is not what you're before us today about, but I hear you on the easements for the driveway. What about the whole point of creating an entirely new road?
John, if I may, this is Joe Murin, interject on that one. Be mindful that we as DEP have numerous projects that are either ongoing or will be ongoing, particularly around the Ashokan. The Ashokan's in a very bad need of a lot of repair. We're going to be planning to do over probably close to $1 billion worth of work around the entirety of the Ashokan Reservoir over the next 10 years and going beyond the existing capital plan. During that time, there is numerous obligations and coordination that we have to do between
Unknown participant is now exiting.
New York State and with the relevant towns and counties up there. And also, at the same time, we're also responsible with our obligations under
Unknown participant is now exiting.
So there are any number of arrangements, I guess I should say, that we make with the when we're doing work up there. And this is more explicit, I think, because as Lisa has pointed out, we do have an obligation as the owners of that road, but there is also the obligation we have as a good neighbor and working cooperatively with our upstate partners to make sure that we're doing everything to maintain the integrity of not just the reservoir, but all the system that, circumnavigates around the reservoir, meaning the roads and the access and everything to that extent. And as you probably, know from the many programs there, such as the septic program, the farm easement program, all under the filtration avoidance determination. So there is other, consideration that we, do take into account when we do enter into these types of agreements. And this particular road, I don't know how much Matt wants to be able to talk to as well, but this has been a very troublesome area within that area for, any number of years. So it's a long in developing this whole restructuring of 28A that we've been working on for a number of years. So this is just a component piece of making sure that we can proceed with that. So I hope that addresses some of your concerns about, what is the consideration, that we as DEP and the system are getting, for this work.
Joe, thank you, unless John has a further question.
No, I don't. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I actually have one. I didn't read the resolution. Normally I would do that, but it was late and there wasn't an opportunity to do it. Ms. Sophia, the question is really for you. We're going to approve one resolution which will approve several easements and permit the contracts obligating the grantee to maintain the driveway part that the city's going to provide, or are we doing 4 resolutions or whatever the number is, which would do that for each of the landowners?
So as we've prepared it, it's one resolution that approves a form easement, and it's just one instrument that you would be approving. We have a contract with them, but that's not a property disposition. And as we got the law department to approve it as a standard class, just one document. So that's how we structured the resolution.
Okay, that's fine. I wasn't quite sure what the mechanism for the transfer was going to be. Are there other questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the resolution?
This is Adam Freed, so moved.
Say again.
This is Adam Freed. I motion to vote.
Thank you, Adam. Is there a second?
Second, Demetrius.
Demetrius, thank you very much. So we have a motion on the table on which we can vote. I'm going to call for a voice vote from each of you, and just ask you to. I'll identify you as I've done in the recent past. Just let me know whether you approve or disapprove. Dr. Carolina.
Approve.
Thank you. Evelyn Fernandez-Ketchum.
Approve.
Mr. Freed.
Approve.
Thank you. Of course, you seconded the motion. John Golden. John Golden?
Sorry, I was on mute. Approve.
Thank you. Drew Kay?
Approve.
Thank you. Arlene?
Approved.
So the motion properly moved and seconded has been voted unanimously.
And excuse me, Mr. Chairman, how do you vote on this issue?
I approve it.
Very good.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Al. I can't see that there's any other business. Is there other business to come before this board?
No, there's not.
Thank you. Then, is there any objection then to concluding the meeting? Hearing none, we're going to adjourn the meeting and assume that the vote was unanimous. What do you think, Al?
Unknown participant is now exiting.
Are there any objections to closing the meeting from any of the board members?
No objections, and thank you
heard
to all the Waterboard and DEP staff for staffing this.
I think it's fine to adjourn the meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Let me say a couple of things before you all take off. This is off the record.
Adam Fried
so
is now exiting.
As I said earlier, organizing this meeting it must have been a tremendous hurdle to get over. It's been handled and so, without a glitch. I want to thank everybody who had anything to do with that. We've just begun the weekend that is often considered the beginning of summer. It's not technically, but I get it. And as we all shelter in and try to distance safely and all the other things, please be aware that it's a holiday weekend. Try your best to enjoy it. But please, 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 everybody on this call, be careful.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You all take care.
Thank you.
Have a good holiday.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful weekend, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Multiple people are now exiting. Multiple people are now exiting. Multiple people are now exiting.